I lived in that apartment for 3 years. 3 long, creeping years. At first, it was nothing special. My best friend Maya found it. Her sister was moving out and needed someone to take over the lease. I jumped at the chance. Back then, I was desperate to get out of my ex-husband's mom's house. We both were. So we took it. No questions asked? The layout was simple. Second floor. Kitchen on the right as you walked in, open to a small living room. Straight ahead, a hallway, long and narrow. About 20 feet. On the left side, 3 doors. First, the 2 bedrooms. Then the bathroom. And at the very end, a final door. The laundry room. For the first year and a half, nothing weird happened. Well, almost nothing. My ex had a gaming setup in the living room. RGB lights. Dual monitors. Loud headset. I had my art studio in the spare room. A desk. Some canvases. A laptop to watch YouTube while painting. Nothing fancy. He taught me to properly shut it down every night. Never leave it on. Always lock the screen. I stuck to that. One night I woke up, half dreaming, to the sound of a video playing. I assumed it was his computer. Maybe one of the cats had stepped on the modem again. I rolled over, annoyed, and went back to sleep. In the morning, he said, "Hey, your laptop was playing videos all night." I turned it off. I blinked. My laptop? Yeah, in your studio. That didn't make sense. The door had been shut. The computer was off. And it needed a passcode to even get to the desktop. But there it was. Open. Playing a YouTube video at 3 a.m. We both laughed it off. But inside I felt strange. Like something had been in that room. After the divorce, he moved out. Took the cats. Left the furniture. Left me. Just me and Luna now. My Great Dane. Sweet girl. Loyal. The kind of dog who snores like a chainsaw but never leaves your side. She always slept in the bedroom with me. Always. And I never felt alone with her. But I did feel watched. Not all the time. Just in certain places. Mostly, the hallway. That hallway was wrong. Too dark at night. Too cold. Too silent. Maya said it had always given her the creeps. Even when her sister lived there. Her sister swore nothing ever happened. But I wasn't so sure. Then came the smell. Cigarettes. Not fresh smoke. The stale kind. Yellowed. Dead. The kind that clings to old furniture and old ghosts. I don't smoke. Maya's sister didn't smoke. But sometimes, I'd walk in and it would hit me like a wall. Other times, it crept in from the laundry room. I cleaned. Sprayed. Checked the vents. Nothing. No explanation. Except one. Something, or someone, had never left. 6 months later, I met Alex. Kind. Patient. Didn't think I was crazy. He started staying over. Especially on nights I didn't feel safe. Which was most nights. I started hearing noises from the kitchen. Rattling. Like dishes moving. Once I swore I heard footsteps. I started locking my bedroom door. But nothing compared to what happened that one night. It was 2 a.m. Dead quiet. Luna jolted up, growling. Now, if you know Great Danes, you know they don't spook easily. But she was alert. Teeth bared. Ears forward. Eyes locked on the hallway. And then, I heard it. Creak, shuffle, shuffle. Someone was walking down the hallway. Toward me. My blood ran cold. I grabbed the pistol from under the bed, shaking. Luna kept growling. I crept to the doorway, expecting to see someone, some intruder, finally revealing themselves. But there was no one. Nothing. I checked the apartment. Doors. Windows. Closets. All locked. All empty. At least. I hoped they were. Alex didn't see much. But he felt it. Sometimes he'd wake up sweating. It felt like someone was in the room, he whispered once. Other times, he'd stare at the ceiling, wide-eyed. I heard whispering, he said. From the hallway. I'd heard it too. Soft. Muffled. Like a conversation. Except there was only ever one voice. And it wasn't mine. One morning, I stepped into the hallway and tripped. Over a spoon. Cold. Clean. Sitting right there in the middle of the floor. I picked it up. Put it back in the drawer. The next day, same thing. Same spot. Same spoon. It was like someone was playing with me. One morning, I went downstairs to get the mail. Angelo, the restaurant owner, was locking up. He asked, "You moving?" I nodded. "Good," he said. "Did you ever see anything up there?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" "Things you can't explain. Voices. Shadows." I told him everything. He nodded. "We've seen stuff in the restaurant too. Cans flying. Mirrors. Cold spots." Then he looked at me and said, "The tenant before Maya's sister? He used a Ouija board in your unit." It all clicked. I wasn't crazy. Something had been invited in. And it never left. My last week there, things peaked. I was in bed. Alex was brushing his teeth. Luna walked in. "Good night, Luna," I said. A moment later, Alex stepped into the bedroom. "Who were you talking to?" he asked. "The dog." He paused. "I heard it twice," he said. Two voices said good night. We didn't speak the rest of the night. On a move-out day, I stood at the door one last time. The hallway behind me was dark. "Still," I said. "I'm leaving now. I don't know why. But I swear." Something whispered back. Finally, I shut the door. And never looked back. It was one of those sick days that doesn't just drain your energy, it swallows you whole. I had a fever, nausea, my head felt heavy, and I'd thrown up earlier that morning. I could barely sit upright, let alone walk around. My mom, being the gentle soul she is, told me to rest in my room. She and my sister were in the other room, curled up and watching something on her phone. Probably one of those reality shows they always get into. It was winter, and the chill had started to settle deep into our bones. The windows in my room were shut, glass panes pulled tight against the cold air outside. Just to paint a picture, as you enter my room, my bed is on the right side. Directly above it are two large sliding windows that open onto our long, narrow balcony. That balcony runs the length of the house, and my window is one of the easiest access points from it. I had curled up beneath the blankets, still shivering despite the layers. My limbs ached, and my head throbbed with every heartbeat. I wasn't trying to sleep so much as escape how horrible I felt. And then, I heard it. A knock. Sharp and sudden, right on the glass behind my head. I winced. Not from fear, but irritation. I didn't even turn around. "Don't do that, I'm sick," I groaned. It had to be my sister. She had this annoying habit of stepping out onto the balcony and tapping on my window just to mess with me. Classic little sister energy. But there was no response. I grunted and tried to ignore it. Maybe she got the message. But not even 2 minutes later, another knock. Just as deliberate. A little louder this time. I sat up, my body groaning in protest. "Mom!" I called out. "Can you ask her to stop knocking on my window? I'm trying to rest." There was a pause. Then I heard my sister's voice, muffled from the other room. "What is he talking about?" My mom replied calmly. "She's right here. She hasn't moved." My chest went still. It was such a simple exchange, but something about it made my skin crawl. That window. That knock. It wasn't her. I turned slowly, like something inside me already knew I wouldn't like what I'd see. And there it was. A shadow. Misty, tall, far too tall to be normal. Its upper body wasn't right, like it was out of focus. It stood just on the other side of the window, behind the cold pane of glass. Not touching it. Not moving. Just watching. I bolted upright, every cell in my body screaming. "Mom!" I shrieked. "There's someone in the balcony!" My scream must have jolted the whole house. My mom came rushing toward me, and I pointed, frantic, to the window behind my bed. "Someone's out there!" I gasped. "I swear to God I saw him! He's tall, like really tall. He was just standing there." Even in my panic, part of my brain had already started spinning terrifying thoughts. Maybe someone climbed up to our balcony. Maybe he's armed. Maybe he's still out there. I tried to stop my mom from going. "No! Don't open it! What if he has a weapon?" But she didn't listen. Like most moms, protective but impossibly brave, she went straight to the balcony. I stood frozen in the hallway, trembling from more than just the fever now. Minutes felt like forever. She came back calmly, brushing her hands on her sweater. "There's no one there," she said. I blinked. "What?" I checked the entire balcony. Even looked over the edge. Nothing. No signs anyone jumped down. No footprints. No sound. She tried to reassure me, but her voice had a slight edge. Not fear exactly, but something else. Something thoughtful. I sat down on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and started crying. Not just from fear. From confusion. Because I know what I saw. My brother, hearing all the chaos, came into the room with that know-it-all older sibling energy. "Probably just sleep paralysis." He shrugged. I shook my head. No. I was awake. I could move. I sat up. I talked. I wasn't dreaming. I knew the difference between a dream and a fever hallucination. This wasn't that. The shadow had been real. I remember the weight of its presence. The strange way it didn't move, didn't flinch when I yelled. Just watched. And then disappeared. Days passed. Weeks. I never saw it again. No more knocks. No more figures. Nothing strange in the balcony. But I never forgot that feeling, that sickening realization that someone, had been staring in. Not trying to get inside. Not trying to talk. Just watching. Whatever it was, it didn't come back. Maybe it got what it wanted. Maybe it was just passing through. But sometimes, when I walk past that window, even in daylight, I catch myself glancing sideways. Just to be sure. Just in case. Because deep down, I still remember what it felt like to not be alone, even when you're supposed to be. I've lived in this house my whole life. Never moved. Not even once. It's an old place, one of those homes that creaks even when no one's moving. The kind with real wood doors, thick stone walls, and a kind of weight in the air that reminds you people lived and died here before you. And yes, there have been deaths here. Now, I should say this up front, I'm an atheist. Maybe agnostic on the more generous days. I don't really believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything after death. I believe in evidence, science, rational explanations. Which makes everything I'm about to say feel even harder to process. It started on a winter night. I was lying in bed with my sibling, both of us tucked under heavy quilts. She's a deep sleeper, always has been. The type that could sleep through an earthquake. I was the one always left staring at the ceiling or doom-scrolling through my phone in the dark, unable to switch my brain off. It was around 1 a.m. when I realized she'd already passed out. I, on the other hand, was wide awake, tossing and turning, feeling the weight of stress clawing at the back of my mind. That's when I heard it. A sound. At first I thought I imagined it, a faint clicking, like fingernails on glass. Then it got louder. A rattle. The cupboard. We have this tall, old cupboard right next to the bed. It has glass-fronted doors, the kind that squeak when you open them and make noise even when the wind shifts. But the windows were closed. There was no fan on. The house was dead silent. And still, I could hear the glass doors shaking. Not lightly, violently, as if something inside was trying to break out. I froze. No part of me wanted to check it. I stayed where I was, heart pounding, and pulled the blanket up over my head like a child. I lay there until exhaustion overpowered fear, and I finally drifted off. But it didn't stop. Night after night, the rattling returned. I told my family. Of course, they brushed it off. My dad said it was probably wood shifting from temperature changes. My mom suggested insects or rodents scratching. I wanted to believe them. I really did. But I knew what I was hearing. The sound wasn't random, it had weight. Purpose. And worst of all, it started waking up my sister too. One night she sat up suddenly and whispered, "Did you hear that?" I looked at her, eyes wide. "The cupboard?" I asked. She nodded, pale. "It's shaking." That night neither of us slept. Eventually, I reached my limit. On one of those nights, again around 1 a.m., the sound started up, louder than usual. I felt the bed vibrate slightly. I forced myself to sit up, reached for my glasses, and turned to look. What I saw nearly made me scream. The bottles, creams, and random junk sitting on top of the cupboard were wobbling back and forth. Not from vibration, from movement. The whole cupboard was trembling, swaying like it was alive. That was enough. I grabbed my phone and pillow and bolted straight out of the room, not even daring to look back. I spent the night in the study room, door shut, lights on. I didn't go back after that. That was years ago. Since then, I've made it a habit to avoid that room. My sibling, however, kept sleeping there for a while. Maybe she was braver. Or maybe she wanted to prove it was all in our heads. That didn't last. A few months ago, she told me something that brought back everything. "I woke up last night," she said quietly, "because the bed was shaking." I froze. "Like earthquake?" I asked. She shook her head. "I checked. Nothing on the news. No one else felt anything. Just me." The bed was trembling hard, like something was pulling at it. And it kept happening. Night after night she'd come out looking pale, sleep-deprived. One morning she whispered to me, "I can't sleep in there anymore." She never did again. And then there were the scratches. I started waking up with these faint marks along my arms, thin, red, and angry-looking. I don't own a cat. I don't wear anything sharp. And the oddest thing is, I never felt them happen. I'd go to sleep fine and wake up marked up like I'd wrestled with something in the dark. I tried every logical explanation. Maybe I scratched myself in my sleep. Maybe I was allergic to something in the sheets. I even changed all the bedding. Nothing helped. I talked to my friends. They all gave me the same look, a mix of curiosity and pity. One of them said maybe it was sleep paralysis, or trauma, or something psychological. But it wasn't. I was awake. Aware. And not alone in experiencing it. What about my sibling? What about my dad? Yes, even he avoids that room now. He used to take naps in there sometimes. Now, without admitting anything, he quietly chooses other rooms. He locks the door sometimes. Won't talk about it. I even asked him once, jokingly, "You don't like that room either, huh?" He just nodded slowly and said, "There's something wrong in there." As someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural, I've tried everything. Science, logic, online forums, psychological theories. But every explanation comes up short. And the more I try to dismiss it, the more I know deep down that something real happened. Something I can't explain. And that terrifies me more than anything.
Growing up as the child of a police officer in India meant that airy stories were never far from the dinner table. But one night, Sitting in our living room with my siblings and dad, something shifted. My father, usually composed and matter-of-fact, began recounting a story that left all of us questioning our childhood home. It all began when we were casually reminiscing and pestering Dad for another story. He had a drink in hand and a soft smile on his face as he talked about a past posting he had at a national park where he'd served as inspector in charge. He told us how most officers chose to live apart from their families, but he always insisted we move with him. He preferred having his family close. 15 years ago, we moved into a government bungalow at the edge of the forest. I was only 6, but I still recall those days with fondness, playing in the garden with our dog, riding along on safaris, and spending lazy afternoons in school. Everything seemed normal. Idyllic even. But as he spoke, his tone shifted. That house, he said quietly, it wasn't what it seemed. He explained how he had moved in ahead of us to clean and get the house ready. When he arrived, he was shocked. The residence had been left in complete disrepair. The previous inspector had chosen not to live there, and it was obvious why. 7-foot shrubs covered the gate and garden. The front path was buried beneath vines. Rats, the size of cats, darted through the kitchen, he said. It looked like nature was trying to reclaim the place. We leaned in closer. He hesitated. You won't sleep tonight if I tell you everything, he warned. But we begged him to continue. We assumed he was just trying to scare us for fun. He finally relented. The house was number 13. Nobody wanted it. My subordinates even warned me against staying there. But I didn't believe in all that. Ghosts, curses, I thought it was nonsense. So I changed the nameplate. Made it E12A instead. Just to keep people from talking. That small detail triggered something in my memory. I remembered the new nameplate. At the time, I thought nothing of it. After a couple weeks of cleaning and renovation, I decided to spend my first night there. My driver and assistant begged me not to. They agreed only if I let them sleep in the patrol car outside. I figured they were being overly superstitious. My mom, who had been quietly listening, raised her eyebrows. You never told me any of this, she said. I didn't think it was worth worrying you, he shrugged. We could tell now, he wasn't joking. Dad continued, his voice low and steady. I moved into the house during the afternoon. The movers had placed the bed in the living room, close to the entrance. I told them to move it into a more private room. They resisted. Said it wasn't a good idea. I had to insist. Eventually, they complied. Later that evening, after checking in at the station, he asked a constable to go back and switch on the house lights. The house was only about 50 meters from the station. Hours passed, and the constable never returned. We went to check on him. Found him passed out in the front lobby. He was older, so we thought it might be the heat. Took him to the doctor. But my driver and assistant were acting strangely. They begged me again to stay at the barracks. I refused. That night, he noticed something unusual. The ceiling fan above the bed had a single bent blade curved downward, as if something had grabbed and pulled it. It wasn't easy to notice, but once he saw it, it unsettled him. I had strange thoughts, he admitted. Maybe someone had hung themselves from it. But I dismissed it. It was an old house. Maybe a branch or vine had tugged at it. I fell asleep. We all groaned, half in disbelief, half in horror. You fell asleep. After all that? I asked. Well, yes. But the next night, something happened. I was woken up around midnight by the sound of faint sobbing. Almost melodic. It wasn't coming from the front. It came from the back of the house, near the kitchen. He walked through the house slowly, turning on all the lights. He checked the window. His aides were fast asleep in the patrol car. But the sobbing continued. He paused. You remember the pantry, right? The one I always asked to keep shut? My mom nodded slowly. I leaned into the kitchen doorway and looked toward the pantry. I saw her. A crouching figure under the slab, a half-burnt woman. Her skin was scorched, and her body curled up as she wept. I blinked, looked again, and she was still there. Her head turned toward me. Her eyes were hollow. Just dark, burnt sockets. We were silent. What did you do? I asked finally. He shrugged. I went back to bed. Left the lights on. Tried to sleep. We couldn't believe it. My brother joked, trying to break the tension, but it didn't land. We could tell Dad wasn't lying. He said the next morning, he confronted his aides about why they refused to stay in the house. They finally told him the story years ago. A man had lived there with his wife and her sister. One of the women had hung herself in the bedroom. The other burned herself in the kitchen. Since then, no one wanted to live there. I didn't care. I'd seen wars on the job, he said. If I could stay there with my family, that would prove the house wasn't cursed. Mom shook her head. You risked our safety for your pride? We all lived there peacefully, didn't we? It was a good house. He admitted he heard the sobbing multiple times while we lived there. Sometimes shadows moved at night. Our house help refused to stay alone with us whenever Dad went out on operations. That's when he got Buddy, our black dog. A friend said black dogs keep spirits away, he said. And with 3 kids, a dog seemed like a good idea anyway. Mom's face darkened. You really didn't tell me any of this. I asked the neighbors not to say anything, he admitted. Didn't want to freak you out. She sighed. Monica, the woman who tutored the kids, told me the whole story months after we moved. I just didn't want to believe it. We sat in silence for a while. Then, someone asked, does the house still exist? No, Dad said. It was demolished. Structurally unsound after years of abandonment. The officer who came after me tried to live there. First night, he ran out screaming. Never went back. We stared at him. Anything else we should know? My sister asked. He finished his drink. Remember the house we stayed in during quarantine? An inspector died in that kitchen of a heart attack in 2018. We all groaned. He smirked. You wanted stories, didn't you? We laughed nervously. Deep down, none of us were sure what to believe. But one thing was certain, that house at the edge of the forest held more than just our childhood memories.
A few years back, I started working at a new school that catered specifically to students with behavioral special needs. The school was located in a small, historic town, the kind where stories seem to cling to every corner. The school building itself was ancient, and right across the street stood an equally old library. Both had reputations that made even skeptics pause. According to local legend, the school was haunted. Supposedly, a janitor had taken his own life by hanging himself in the third-floor closet. Then there were the stories of 3 young girls who allegedly jumped to their deaths from the same floor. One tale even involved a nun murdered somewhere on campus back when the school was a Catholic institution. Across the street, the library was built on what had once been the town's execution grounds, the site of public hangings. While most of these stories had no concrete evidence, they were passed down through generations. The only part of the legend confirmed was that the library stood where the gallows once were. Everything else was just whispered history. But I would soon experience something that made me rethink what I thought I knew. My best friend's mother worked at the school long before I joined. She often shared little oddities she'd witnessed. One recurring incident she described was the janitor's closet light. Every evening, they made a point of shutting off all the lights before leaving. But by morning, the third-floor closet light would be on again. The same closet where the janitor had reportedly hanged himself. She also mentioned that she liked to take walks around the campus after work. Usually, she didn't encounter anything strange. But one evening, shortly after clocking out, she noticed a figure in the tree limbs surrounding the back of the school. As she got closer, she saw what looked like a woman wearing a nun's habit. The face wasn't visible, but the outline and attire were unmistakable. She quickly returned to her car and never saw the figure again. These tales were unnerving, but I chalked them up to exaggerations or folklore. That is, until my own experience proved otherwise. It was late in the school year, and I was still adjusting to the demands of my new job. I had spent the entire day working with challenging students and was staying late to finish paperwork. Unlike most of my colleagues, I wasn't used to the pace yet, so I often ended up being one of the last to leave. That particular evening, only 3 of us remained on the 3rd floor. Myself, another teacher who worked 2 doors down, and our boss. We each had our own classrooms, and the rest of the building was eerily silent. As I was wrapping up and preparing to head out, I saw a woman walk past my classroom door. She was heading toward the end of the hallway, where my co-worker's room was located. Assuming it was my boss going to chat with her, I figured I'd catch up with both of them and get a chance to ask a few work-related questions. I packed up my bag, turned off the lights, and locked my classroom door. But as I stepped into the hallway, I was struck by the silence. With thin walls and an open classroom door, I should have heard chatter, but there was nothing. I reached my co-worker's classroom, only to be met by a pale, terrified expression on her face. Concerned, I asked what was wrong. She looked shaken. "Did you see her?" she asked. "See who?" I replied, now more confused than concerned. I glanced around the classroom. No unfamiliar faces. No boss either. She stepped into the hallway with me and pointed toward the window at the end. "That girl." She walked past my room. I thought she was a student who had gotten lost. But when I came out to look, she walked straight through that window. My jaw dropped. I ran to the window and tried to open it. But the windows on the 3rd floor were nailed shut, a standard precaution at a behavioral school. There was no way anyone, let alone a teenager, could have passed through it. My co-worker was visibly panicking, and I wasn't sure what to think. I grabbed her things while she composed herself, and we left together without even saying goodnight to our boss. It felt like we had both seen something we couldn't explain, and we didn't want to stick around to find out more. The incident with the girl in the hallway left a mark on me. It was by far the most terrifying moment I had ever experienced, but it wasn't the only strange occurrence at the school. Over time, there were smaller things. Doors that were locked at night, somehow found open in the morning, papers scattered mysteriously across desks, and unexplained cold spots in certain parts of the building. Though these could be brushed off as accidents or tricks of the mind, in the context of that one vivid encounter, they took on a more sinister tone. My co-worker and I rarely talked about that evening again, but I could tell it haunted her too. Eventually, the school shut down. Low enrollment and structural decay were blamed, but many locals whispered about the hauntings and the growing unease among staff. I can't say I was sorry to see it close. Soon after, plans for demolition were announced. They say the building will be leveled and something new will rise in its place. I sometimes wonder if that will be enough to wipe away whatever lingers in those halls. If the stories were just that, stories. or if some truths are simply buried too deep to be erased by bricks and bulldozers. Even now, I can still picture that hallway, that window, and the girl who vanished into the impossible. And every time I think of that school, I remember the silence that followed, too deep, too hollow, and the sense that we had all been watched. Whether it was legend, hallucination, or something beyond explanation, I'll never forget what I saw that night on the third floor. A few years ago, on a crisp Friday the 13th under the light of a full moon, I joined 10 close friends for a weekend camping trip to Snively Hot Springs in Eastern Oregon. It was a short drive, just over an hour, and even though I'd work the next day, I couldn't resist the call of nature, hot springs, and good company. Planning to keep it light on the drinks, I aimed to enjoy the night without the hangover. We arrived at the campsite and quickly found a perfect, secluded spot away from the noise of other campers. As we set up our tents and built our campfire, laughter and anticipation filled the air. The evening began to melt into one of those timeless, beautiful memories. When we finally dipped into the hot springs, the sun was setting in a blaze of color over the hills. We soaked together, all of us relaxed and smiling, bathed in the golden twilight, a moment that felt suspended in time. After our soak, a few of us decided to go on a moonlit hike. The idea of wandering the hills under the stars, with the full moon overhead, was irresistible. Half the group lagged behind, too high or too tipsy to be organized. Only 3 of us, myself, my friend girl, and friend boy, ended up committing to the adventure. Oh, and his loyal dog joined, too. We were microdosing mushrooms throughout the evening, so everything had that soft, surreal glow. Edges a little dreamlike, colors a little more vivid. It wasn't overwhelming, just a slight enhancement of the senses. We grabbed a flashlight, dressed warmly, and set out, though in hindsight, headlamps for everyone would have been a smart idea. We walked uphill for about 10 minutes, then came to a trail that veered right. A cattle guard blocked the path, flanked by barbed wire fences. That should have been our first red flag. Instead, we picked up the dog, crossed the guard, and continued. Not even 3 minutes in, a loud, rustling noise stopped us cold. It was close, too close. Friend boy raised the flashlight, sweeping the beam across the brush ahead. And then, like something out of nightmare, 2 glowing eyes caught the light. You know how cat eyes shine at night? Now, imagine eyes like that, but attached to something bigger than you. We were face to face with a mountain lion. We froze. Instinctively, we began to back away slowly, whispering to each other to stay calm. The dog darted off to the side, running parallel to us through the dark. We kept backing up until our heels hit the barbed wire. We turned to see the dog, safely at our side. But if she'd been there the whole time, would have been running next to us. We turned the flashlight toward the noise, and there it was, another mountain lion. A pair, likely a mother and her cub. This wasn't just bad luck. This was danger. Faced with a barbed wire fence and no safe retreat, we had to act fast. On the other side of the fence was someone else's campsite. Without time to think, we hoisted the dog over first, then climbed the fence ourselves, ripping our clothes and tearing skin in the process. Friend boy gashed his leg badly, blood mixing with adrenaline as we stumbled into the unfamiliar camp. Everything was eerily quiet. We didn't see anyone around, but the tents and supplies were clearly in use. Our nerves fried and our instincts in overdrive, we spotted a car and bolted toward it. Miraculously, it was unlocked. We climbed in and began honking the horn, hoping the loud noise would scare off the cougars, or at least alert someone to our presence. We shouted from the windows, making sure anyone nearby knew we weren't thieves. We yelled that there were mountain lions nearby, hoping to avoid confrontation. But what was strange, unsettling even, was that nobody came. No one from the campsite responded. Friend girl said she heard something, like a faint, muffled scream. She insisted someone was trying to call for help. Friend boy, ever the rational one, insisted we leave. I didn't hear anything myself, but something about the silence didn't sit right with me. My gut twisted as we made our way through the shadows, searching for a path back to our own camp. With every step, I felt those glowing eyes burning into my back. We were exposed, vulnerable, and very possibly being followed. I whispered a prayer, even though I'm not religious. We stumbled through the brush, finally spotting the familiar glimmer of our campfire in the distance. When we returned, the others were laughing, drinking, oblivious to our ordeal. I climbed into a car and locked the doors, completely overcome by a full-blown panic attack. Gnats swarmed me through the cracked sunroof, but I couldn't care less. I was shaking, breathing fast, sure the mountain lions were stalking us still. Friend girl joined me in the car, sacrificing her own comfort to help pull me out of the fear spiral. She brought a bottle of tequila and more mushrooms. If we die tonight, she joked, we'll die happy together. Somehow, that twisted bit of humor helped. I calmed down enough to leave the car, rejoin the others, and let the night roll on. The next morning, I was wrecked. Hungover, exhausted, and mentally fried, I didn't even bother calling into work. I no-called, no-showed, and got fired for it. But you know what? I still don't regret it. That night was one of the most beautiful and terrifying experiences of my life. Even now, years later, I sometimes have nightmares. I see glowing eyes in the darkness, feel the cold sweat of being watched. I dream of running, always running, chased by shadows. And sometimes I think about that other campsite, the one we ran through in the middle of the night. No one ever came out. No voices answered our yells. And friend girl, who I'm no longer in touch with, was adamant she heard a scream. What happened at that site? Was someone in trouble? Were we too scared to help? Or did we wander into something we were never meant to witness? That thought still haunts me. I'll never know what was really going on that night. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. Either way, the memory of that moonlit mountain, those glowing eyes, and that endless silence will stay with me forever. So, if you ever go camping under a full moon in cougar country, don't wander too far from the firelight. And whatever you do, pack in, pack out. Even ghosts hate litter. Roughly 20 years ago, my wife and I just tied the knot. Things were tight financially, so instead of a grand European honeymoon, we opted for something more affordable and closer to home, a trip to Niagara Falls. We booked a hotel on the American side, not far from the falls, hoping for a few peaceful days to celebrate the beginning of our life together. Our flight itinerary had us arriving in Buffalo by late afternoon, but our plans were quickly derailed. During a layover in Chicago, we were bumped to a later flight due to overbooking. By the time we landed in Buffalo, sorted out the rental car, and drove to the hotel, it was well past midnight. We were exhausted. The hotel suite was corny in a honeymoon kind of way. A heart-shaped hot tub sat awkwardly in the center of the room, untouched by us. We couldn't stop thinking about how many other newlyweds had used it. My wife, barely able to keep her eyes open, collapsed onto the bed, curling up on her side, facing away from the room. Meanwhile, I headed into the bathroom to unpack our toiletries and freshen up. As I was rinsing my face, I suddenly heard her talking. I peeked out and asked, "Who are you talking to?" She bolted upright. "Didn't you just sit on the bed next to me?" I blinked in confusion. "No, I've been in the bathroom this whole time." Her face turned pale. I swear I felt someone sit right next to me. I tried to soothe her, chalking it up to fatigue. "You're just tired. Maybe you dozed off and dreamed it." But she insisted, her voice shaking slightly. We both got into our pajamas and crawled into bed, the tension still hanging in the air, but overshadowed by how tired we were. A few hours later, I was pulled out of sleep by my wife shaking me. At first, I thought it was for something romantic, but her tone was stern and frightened. "No, shut up. There's someone in the room." Disoriented, I fumbled in the dark for a light source. My wife can't sleep unless it's completely dark, so everything around us was pitch black. I finally found a bedside lamp and flicked it on. We looked around. The room was empty. The door was still latched with the additional security lock. Under the bed, clear. Bathroom, empty. "What exactly did you hear?" I asked. She stared at me. I heard someone walking out of the bathroom and coming toward my side of the bed. We eventually calmed down and drifted back to sleep, unaware that things were about to get weirder. Our second night began with some hopeful normalcy. We had spent the day exploring Niagara Falls and returned to our hotel, ready for a relaxing evening. As a precaution, we locked the door securely, made sure the latch was in place, and left the TV on mute for a little background noise. We hoped for uninterrupted rest. Unfortunately, that hope quickly faded. Sometime after midnight, we were both startled awake by heavy footsteps echoing around the room. We sat up, frozen, listening. The sound was unmistakable, deliberate steps pacing around. I called out, "Hello." No response. Then we felt it. The mattress shifted. Someone or something had just sat on the edge of the bed. I jumped up and turned on the light. Once again, nothing. No one. The room was locked, the chains still fastened, and no possible hiding place had been disturbed. We stared at each other, now well beyond the point of blaming exhaustion. Trying to brush it off, we left the TV on, volume low but not muted, hoping the noise would be enough to drive away whatever was happening. We were barely dozing off again when another noise came from the bathroom. This time it wasn't footsteps alone. It sounded like someone moving inside, knocking things gently, almost deliberately. Fueled by adrenaline and fear, I grabbed the nearest object I could use as a weapon, an umbrella. I crept toward the bathroom and swung the door open. Empty. No signs of movement, no shifting shadows. Nothing. But it didn't make us feel any better. The next morning, I approached the front desk and asked if our neighboring guest had been particularly active at night. The clerk gave me a curious look and asked for our room number. When I told her, she furrowed her brow. "Sir, there haven't been any guests on either side of your room. You're in a corner suite. No one is next to you." That night, we tried again to reclaim our honeymoon vibe. We returned to our room earlier, shared a small picnic of cheese, crackers, and wine, and set up our sleep conditions. Lights off, bathroom door closed, TV on, door double locked. Still, as the clock passed midnight, the sound of footsteps returned. This time, it was even more distinct. We sat silently in bed, hearing the floor creak beside us, as if someone was pacing in slow, deliberate circles around the bed. "That's definitely not next door," I whispered. My wife nodded, clutching my arm. Then we both felt the bed shift once again. Someone was sitting down. In a trembling voice, my wife shouted, "Please leave us alone. We're on our honeymoon." The pressure vanished. We looked at each other, unsure whether to cry or laugh. We turned up the TV and put on reruns of Friends, letting the sound wrap around us like a security blanket. The next morning, I woke up feeling dazed. I turned to my wife and asked, "Did you go to the bathroom last night?" She gave me a look. "No way. There's a ghost in there." I wasn't leaving this bed, but the bathroom door was wide open. That was the final straw. We went downstairs and asked the front desk if we could change rooms. My wife blurted it out before I could find a more diplomatic explanation. "Our room is haunted." To our surprise, the woman at the counter didn't flinch. "All right, I can move you to another room," she said without missing a beat. She even offered to send staff to help with our luggage. We declined and chose to move everything ourselves. Somehow, carrying our own bags made us feel a little more in control of the situation. Our new room was uneventful. No creaks, no phantom footsteps, no pressure on the bed. Just the sound of our breathing and the gentle hum of the TV. We slept through the night for the first time since we had arrived. Looking back, we still talk about those nights and wonder what it was that shared the room with us. Maybe it was the spirit of someone who had passed in that hotel, longing for company. Maybe it was just a trick of our exhausted minds. But when we felt the mattress dip beside us, that wasn't imagination. That was real, and it never came back after we changed rooms. It all started during winter break, when my roommate and I were staying with our respective families for the holidays. One night, we were on FaceTime, just catching up. Out of nowhere, my roommate mentioned they were hearing strange noises coming from the attic. Having grown up in a haunted house myself, I immediately warned them not to investigate, but they didn't listen. They climbed up anyway. A few days later, they started texting me constantly. They were hearing odd sounds, seeing things move, and just generally feeling unsettled. I told them to firmly tell whatever it was to leave. But instead, they did the worst thing they could have done. They named it. Naming a spirit gives it power. I didn't say much at the time, but deep down, I felt a sense of dread settle in. 2 days after their attic incident, we both returned to our shared college apartment. That's when things took a strange turn. My partner, who lived with us, began hearing my voice and my roommate's voice while he was showering, clear as day, as if we were right outside the bathroom door. I brushed it off as an echo, or maybe the pipes. But then I started hearing things, too. Except for me, it was only my roommate's voice, mimicking their tone and speech patterns perfectly. Late at night, I began hearing laughter coming from my roommate's room. Their closet door would slam shut, then creak open again. I thought they were just staying up late, so I texted asking them to quiet down since I had class early. They responded with a confused Snapchat. They were at work, miles away. Confused and a little unnerved, I went to their room. The closet door was open, but nothing else seemed out of place. What made this even weirder was the fact that we had no neighbors. The units next to us were vacant, and no new tenants were expected for a few more weeks. There was no one who could have been making those sounds. The entity, whatever it was, had started to manifest. When the pandemic hit, our campus shut down, and my roommate decided not to renew the lease. With no in-person classes, they couldn't justify paying rent. Meanwhile, my partner and I weren't ready to move back in with our families. So we started searching for a new place and found one quickly. It was smaller than our previous apartment, but cozy enough. But the sense of peace didn't last. Soon after we moved in, I started experiencing sleep paralysis. I would wake up in the middle of the night, completely unable to move, with a heavy presence in the room. In the shower, I would hear my partner calling my name. Sometimes it was urgent, other times just casual conversation. But when I responded, there was no reply. Peeking out from behind the curtain, I find a bathroom door still shut and locked. My partner had similar experiences. They would hear me speaking to them while they were alone. At first, we didn't want to believe it was happening again. But soon, it became clear that whatever had attached itself to us from the last apartment had followed us here. Other things began happening too. Footsteps in the hallway, our names whispered from the other side of the door, the feeling of being watched. We tried to rationalize it all. Maybe we were just tired or stressed, but it was more than that. Eventually, we decided to break our lease. The building management had failed to disclose that they were renting out the wall-adjacent unit to a rooftop bar. Legally, it allowed us to leave without penalty. It was an easy decision, but the relief was short-lived. My partner's parents let us stay at their lake house temporarily. It was quiet, secluded, and close to my job and the school. We thought we might finally get some rest. But the entity had come with us once again. The first few nights at the lake house were quiet, but the strange occurrences soon started again. One night, we were jolted awake by loud banging on the bedroom door and someone yelling at us to get up. The voice was muffled, but distinctly sounded like my partner's mother. I got up to check, only to find that no one was there. My partner told me that just before going to bed, they had seen a shadowy figure dart from their sister's old bedroom into their parents' room. The sight of it terrified them. We realized that whatever had been with us since that attic incident was not confined by walls or distance. We spent that week sleeping lightly, if at all. The mimicry of voices became worse, more frequent, more realistic. But there were no physical manifestations, just sounds, shadows, and the unshakable feeling that something malevolent was always nearby. Fortunately, our final move for college came just days later. We relocated to a new apartment, and for the first time in 2 years, everything went quiet. No more voices in the shower. No more slamming doors. No more laughter echoing in the night. Looking back, I still can't explain what we experienced. I've had many ghost stories throughout my life, but this was the only time an entity mimicked the voices of people I love. It felt intimate, invasive, and dangerous. Whatever it was, it fed off familiarity, using it to lure, deceive, and frighten. We never saw it, but we heard it. We felt it. And even now, years later, the memory sent a chill down my spine. The hospice house I work at today wasn't always what it is now. Years ago, it functioned as a children's psychiatric facility. These walls have seen more than their fair share of emotional pain, and sometimes it feels like that energy never left. The building is split in two. Upstairs is the hospice care unit, and downstairs functions as a small respite and assisted living space for PACE participants. I could write an entire book on the strange happenings I've witnessed here. I worked at this hospice house a few years ago and recently returned. Since then, the facility has undergone major renovations. Most of the newer staff claim they've never experienced anything unusual. Even the two long-time employees admit things have quieted down. Yet, a worker from downstairs once told me she still hears children playing frequently. I believe her. The energy never fully dissipated. This place has always had a personal tie for me. My grandmother was once a patient here, staying in room 138 about 2 years before I started working. She eventually went home to pass, but during her stay, that room seemed to absorb something. A few co-workers also had relatives in 138, and none of them recall feeling comfortable in it. One night, an RN walked up to where we were sitting and asked if we could help the patient in room 38 with the phone. They had called the nurse's desk, but all she could hear on the line was static and rustling. The other CNA and I glanced at each other in confusion. That room was empty. Still, we went to check. As we stepped inside, the air felt oppressively heavy. We both got chills. There was no one inside, but something was definitely there. Months passed, and we forgot the incident until one night, a different RN came to us with a similar request. She said someone from room 38 had called the desk and asked if anyone was coming to check on him. When we asked if he had given a name, she said, "Yeah, he said his name was Derek." Again, the room was empty. We exchanged glances, unsettled. A few months later, I was sitting at the desk filling out reports when the phone rang. The caller ID showed room 138. I picked it up, and once more all I heard was rustling. No voice. That same RN from the first incident later told me she had experienced it again, and she was so unnerved that she asked me to sit with her the next night. The strange events didn't stop with phantom phone calls. That same RN seemed to be a magnet for paranormal activity, maybe because she was more afraid than the rest of us. One night, she asked me to sit with her near the staff entrance. She said she kept hearing knocking sounds, and she was worried someone might be outside trying to break in or steal medications. The glass at that door is frosted, so it's difficult to see clearly, but you can sometimes make out vague shapes. That night, there appeared to be the outline of someone standing just outside. We walked around to the front entrance to check if anyone was out there, but found no one. We returned to our seats. Not even 5 minutes passed before the knocking resumed. Thinking it might be the patient in the room next to the staff entrance, we went to check on her. She said she was fine, but had also heard knocking on her door. She told whoever it was to come in, but no one did. Another night, right at shift change, we had a patient pass away. At the same time, 2 new admissions were arriving. We rushed through post-mortem care, but forgot the tradition of opening the window to release the spirit. We were so busy we didn't think about it until much later. After everything settled, we sat down to chart, and out of nowhere, the emergency broadcast tone rang out. There were no TVs on nearby, and the weather radio remained silent. It played once with no announcement, just that shrill sound. But we brushed it off. Later, I went to get food for everyone. When I returned, the pager went off. The sound indicated a bathroom call light had been pulled. Knowing no one was outside and the front doorbell hadn't rung, we checked the room. The patient was fully bedbound and sound asleep, but the bathroom cord had been pulled down. Half an hour later, the same thing happened in a different room. That's when it hit us. We had never opened the window after the earlier death. We went in, opened it, and after that, the night was quiet. The idea that someone had to be released after death was something we respected more and more with each passing experience. Little things continue to happen, always unnerving but never outright harmful. Still, there were constant reminders that something else was sharing our workspace. Sometimes, the timing of these incidents was eerily significant. We'd hear strange noises, and during the next set of rounds, discover that someone had passed. One night, as we stood at the central nurse's station chatting with a nurse, I caught a quick flash of light out of the corner of my eye. It looked like a glare from a door opening in the foyer, though no one was there. I turned to say something when I noticed the CNA next to me had also seen it. We went down the hall together, unsure of what we'd find. In the very first room, the patient was gone. We alerted the nurse, who didn't believe us at first. She just checked on him 5 minutes earlier and said he was fine. We saw these things not just as oddities, but as signs, subtle cues from something beyond our understanding. Maybe it was residual energy, maybe spirits clinging to familiarity, or perhaps something else entirely. The hospice house may have been remodeled, its surfaces refreshed, and its corners brightened, but under it all still lie the remnants of its past. Between the laughter of unseen children, the phone calls from empty rooms, and the quiet understanding that every knock might mean more than it seems, this place is alive in ways most people can't explain. For now, the energy is calmed. Maybe the remodel gave restless spirits peace, or maybe they're just waiting for the right night to remind us they're still here. Back in the early days of our relationship, my fiancé and I were still living with our parents. Privacy was scarce, and finding any place to be alone was more of a challenge than you'd expect. One day, out of desperation for uninterrupted time together, we reached out to a mutual friend who had a bit of a rebellious streak and knew all the quiet spots around town. We figured she'd have suggestions, and she didn't disappoint. She told us about this stretch of rural road just outside town. According to her, it was the kind of place people went when they didn't want to be disturbed. Long, narrow, and lined with only a handful of houses, mostly surrounded by farmland and abandoned barns. She assured us that once the sun went down, no one used the road except maybe the people who lived along it. It seemed like exactly what we needed. One late evening, driven by curiosity and more than a little romantic impulse, we decided to check it out. As we approached the entrance of the road, an immediate heaviness settled over us. Our stomachs knotted with nervous tension, the kind you can't quite explain but try to rationalize away. We assumed it was just jitters from sneaking away to do something we weren't used to. The road, it turned out, was pitch black. No streetlights, no nearby porch lights, just a faint glow of our headlights carving a narrow path ahead. We decided to drive the entire length of the road first, about a mile or so, just to make sure we were really alone. Nothing but silence and darkness. It was a place frozen in time, untouched by the chaos of city life. Once we reached the end and confirmed there were no other cars or signs of activity, we turned around and made our way back to a spot near the entrance to park. Still, the anxiety persisted. We both felt it, an uncanny pressure in the air, as if the night itself were holding its breath. I tried to ignore the pounding in my chest, chalking it up to nerves, while my fiancé, who's usually the calm one, admitted he felt it too. That struck me. He's not the type to get easily spooked. He's level-headed, rational, rarely anxious about anything. But in that moment, standing beside the car in the middle of nowhere, even he looked uneasy. We talked about it for a few minutes, trying to laugh it off, trying to convince ourselves it was just unfamiliarity, just nerves about being somewhere new, doing something a little bold. But even during our time there, the tension never really let up. It was like we were being watched, though by what we couldn't say. Eventually, we gave up on the idea of staying. The discomfort outweighed the thrill, and we left, agreeing that maybe this road wasn't the right place after all. Despite what we had agreed, time passed, and well, hormones are persuasive. About 2 weeks later, we found ourselves talking again about that road. Maybe we were just paranoid that first time. Maybe we had worked ourselves up for no reason. Curiosity mixed with desire led us to try again. The second drive, there was eerily similar to the first. Quiet, dark, tense. This time, though, it was heavier. The moment we turned onto the road, the weight on our chests returned, only worse. It felt like the kind of pressure you get when you know you're somewhere you shouldn't be. Instead of immediately looking for a place to stop, we decided to just cruise the road like one of our usual late-night drives. We told ourselves we were just exploring the area. But then, in the spirit of experimentation, my fiancé suggested we park again. Not for anything serious this time, but just to feel the vibe of the place. He wanted to see if the unease would pass once we got used to the setting. So we pulled off to the side of the road and turned off the car completely. No headlights, no interior lights, just the dense silence of the countryside pressing against the windows. Gradually, our eyes adjusted to the darkness, and things started to feel a bit more playful. We joked around, dared each other to open the car doors, laughed about the creepy setting. At one point, my fiancé turned to me and asked, should I go stand in the middle of the road for a few seconds? It was meant to be a joke, but something about it felt wrong. I didn't hesitate. No, I told him firmly. Don't do that. I didn't know why, but my gut was screaming not to let him step outside. He listened. Looking back, I wonder what might have happened if he had. We both admitted as we sat in that car that we still felt watched. It wasn't overpowering like before, but it was there, a lingering awareness, like unseen eyes were locked on us from somewhere out in the fields or the trees. After a few more minutes, we decided to head out. He turned the car back on, we drove to the end of the road to turn around, and began making our way back toward the entrance. The entire loop couldn't have taken more than 2 minutes. But when we reached the spot where we had just been parked, there was a car sitting there. Not our car, another car, parked almost exactly where we had been, maybe 20 feet away. We hadn't passed anyone on the way down. No headlights had come up behind us. It didn't make sense. Maybe they just pulled in while we were turning around. My fiancé offered weakly. We slowed as we passed the vehicle, peering into the windows. There was no one inside. The car sat motionless, lights off, windows fogged ever so slightly by the cool night air. But inside, completely empty. No driver, no passengers, just a vehicle in the dark. We didn't speak for a moment. We were both processing it in real time, our thoughts racing in silence. The only sound was the hum of our engine. Slowly, we pulled away, our eyes glued to the rearview mirror. How did they even get there that fast? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, there's no way they parked and got out without us seeing them. We were gone 2 minutes. There's nowhere they could have gone without crossing in front of us. The logic didn't add up. We'd have seen their headlights if they pulled in. We'd have seen them walking if they left. But there was nothing. Just that strange, empty car, exactly where we had just been sitting. We considered one possibility, that maybe the car had approached us from behind, with its lights off, parking quietly while we were sitting there in darkness. That idea made our skin crawl. Who would do that? Why? Trying to calm ourselves, we convinced each other that it had to be a coincidence. Someone else just looking for privacy. But still, the way it had appeared and disappeared didn't feel coincidental at all. Within minutes, we found ourselves turning back to check. If the car was still there, we could tell ourselves it was nothing. Just a quiet visitor. No big deal. But as we reached the entrance of the road again, the car was gone. Gone. Not only that, but fresh tire tracks in the gravel showed exactly where it had been parked and how quickly it had left. It had peeled off in a hurry, kicking up dust in its wake. We didn't waste time. We turned the car around and drove straight home. That night, and many nights after, we tried to piece it together, try to find the rational thread that would unravel the unease. But there wasn't one. We kept coming back to how we had been casually opening our doors earlier, how he nearly stepped out into the darkness, how someone or something might have been just beyond our sight the entire time. Maybe it was all harmless. Maybe it was just another car and a nervous coincidence. But in our hearts, we both knew something was off. There was a presence on that road, a quiet watcher, and we were lucky to leave untouched. Even now, we still talk about that night. Not with fear, exactly, but with that haunted feeling you get when you know something was wrong and still can't explain it. Some places have stories, and some roads remember. That one will never drive again.